And my next guest, who happens to be a world-famous brain surgeon, has become even more of a sensation after lecturing President Obama on some of his biggest obstacles, those being the debt, taxes, and health care. Now, just yesterday at the National Prayer Breakfast, standing only a few feet from the president, Dr. Benjamin Carson took to the podium and shared some, well, pretty amazing, smart advice. Listen to this.
Our deficit is a big problem. Think about it. And our national debt, $16.5 trillion. You think that's not a lot of money? Tell you what, count one number per second. One number per second. You know how long it would take you to count the 16 trillion? 507,000 years. You make $10 billion, you put in $1 billion. You make $10, you put in 1. Of course, you got to get rid of the loopholes. Some people say, well, that's not fair because it doesn't hurt the guy who made $10 billion as much as the guy who made 10. Where does it say you have to hurt the guy? He just put $1 billion in the pot. You know, we don't need to hurt him.
Amazing speech. Move over, President Obama. The doctor is in the house. Joining me now, the man himself, author of America the Beautiful, Johns Hopkins University Director of Pediatric Neurosurgery, Dr. Benjamin Carson. Dr. Carson, I got to tell you, that speech moved me deeply. Very well done. What's the reaction been so far?
The reaction has been overwhelming. We've been just deluged with emails, with calls, 99.5% positive.
Wow.
And that doesn't surprise me because the way that I laid things out was really logical. It wasn't right wing, it wasn't left wing. It was just logic and common sense. And this is what people are starving for coming out of Washington, D.C. I don't know where we left our brains.
I don't know where we did either. Before I get into the content, and it was very deep and very profound to me, simple yet profound. Your background is amazing, and you talked about it in your speech. Your mom married at 13, one of 24 children. You grew up in poverty, and you had you said you were not a good student. But tell us a little bit, tell us that story, because I think everybody needs to hear it.
Yeah, well, you know, obviously I had all the strikes against me. Single parent home, dire poverty, poor self-esteem, horrible temper. These things tend to preclude success, and they would have in my case also. But my mother, who had only a third-grade education, refused to be a victim. That was the key. She never felt sorry for herself, and that was a good thing. But the problem was she never felt sorry for us either. So, you know, there was never an excuse that we could give that was good enough. And if we gave an excuse, she would come out with a poem called Yourself to Blame. And after a while, we just stopped looking for excuses. But she worked as a domestic, 2 and 3 jobs at a time, because she didn't want to be on welfare. Even though she only had a third-grade education, she was very observant. And she noticed that no one she ever saw go on welfare came off of it. So she didn't want to be dependent, and she didn't want us to be dependent either. So she would work as long and as hard as was necessary. Wow. And one of the things she observed in the homes where she worked is that people didn't watch a lot of TV. And they spent a lot of time reading and strategizing. So one day she came home and just turned the TV off. Said, you guys watch too much TV. If you improve yourself, if you improve your brain, one day people will be watching you on television. And of course she was right about that. And, you know, I hated reading because that's what she imposed upon us. You've got to read 2 books apiece from the Detroit Public Libraries and submit to me written book reports, which she couldn't read, but we didn't know that. And I hated it because everybody else was outside playing and having a good time. But as I started reading, things began to happen. I was looking at words all the time. Suddenly, I could spell. I wasn't the first one to sit down on the spelling bee. Grammar and syntax. I learned how to express myself. You learn how to use your imagination rather than just observing somebody else's imagination. All of those make you into a terrific student. Within the space of a year and a half, I went from the bottom of the class to the top of the class and began to have a much different view.
What a great, and you
myself.
said you had to do those 2 book reports, and then you said your mother didn't know how to read them, but she convinced you she did.
Yeah, she put little check marks and highlights and things on them, and we would think that she was reading them.
Wow.
She did, I will tell you, to her credit, she did eventually get her GED. She went on to college, and in 1994, she got an honorary doctorate, so she's Dr. Carson now, too.
You talked a lot about political correctness. You said it's dangerous. You said it muzzles people. You said there's a PC police force out there. You said it prevents people from saying what they mean, that we need to get over our sensitivity. Explain.
Yeah. Well, you know, here's a nation, one of the founding pillars was freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And yet, we have imposed upon people restrictions on what they can say, on what they can think. And the media, I think, is the largest proponent of this, crucifying people who say things really quite innocently. I mean, you think back a few weeks ago, the sportscaster who commented on the beauty of the quarterback's female, and people thought, that can't be right. And there was a big brouhaha, and finally they realized, well, I guess there's nothing wrong with it. And the woman even was thankful for the compliment. But this is the level of silliness that we've risen to.
All right, Doctor, stay right there. We're going to come back. Your amazing story, this incredible speech that you gave. We're going to talk about how you're saying the fabric of American society now is being changed. You talk about education, taxes, the healthcare system. We'll have more with Dr. Carson right after the break, and still to come tonight.
Yes, I voted twice.
So were these all legal votes in your mind?
Absolutely legal votes. Absolutely.
An Ohio poll worker is convinced voting twice is just absolutely fine. We have that story on blatant voter fraud out of Ohio still to come on this busy News Friday night. And welcome back to Hannity. We continue with the author of America the Beautiful, Johns Hopkins University Director of Pediatric Neurosurgery, Dr. Benjamin Carson. Dr. Carson, a lot has been made of the fact that some of the things you discussed in this speech are policies that are very contrary to the president. You talked at length about America's educational system failing. We're being dumbed down, is a phrase you used. The dangers of our debt and our deficit, class warfare, which you spoke out against, the tax issue, health savings accounts, that Rome can happen to America. What is your response to those that said, wow, you said that in front of the president?
Well, first of all, I should say that these are my own views. They don't represent the university that I'm employed by. But, you know, it really didn't matter who I was sitting in front of, because you know, I always pray before I give a speech, and I ask God to give me the right things to say. And I think that, that it's very rare these days for people to speak the truth. Everybody wants to go along to get along. And in the meantime, the fabric of our nation is being destroyed. We're going from a can-do nation to a what can you do for me nation. And I don't think that's what most people want, but you know, it's presented to them as the thing to do. And one of the real dangers, which I alluded to in the speech, is the fact that people don't know anything. They don't know about history. They don't know about technology. They know so little that the news media is able to tell them whatever they want them to think. And they say it enough times and people say, oh, yeah, well, that's what they said on the news. And they don't think for themselves. The founders of our nation said, our nation will fundamentally change when people become so ignorant that they can be easily led.
Would you ever run for president, sir?
If the Lord grabbed me by the collar and made me do it, I would. It's not my intention.
I wouldn't wish that on you, but I think I would vote for you in a heartbeat.
Well, thank you. I have so many emails from people saying that I could probably finance my campaign if each one gave me a nickel.
Okay. What about, you gave a warning, though, about America. I share your concern. Morally, I see a decay in the country. $16.5 trillion in debt scares me. We're stealing from our kids. You came up with a great idea. I've always believed in health savings accounts. I don't like class warfare. What can we do to change things? You said we could either go down the direction of Rome, or we can change things.
Yeah, well, I think the brave leaders, not the ones who are just wrapped up in their egos, And, you know, I'm not pointing this at any particular person or at any particular party. But the fact of the matter is there are a lot of people with a lot of hubris which just thinks my way or the highway. And the reason that I gave the example of the eagle with two wings, a left wing and a right wing, is that all good ideals don't reside in one party. But as the Bible says, in a multitude of counselors is safety. But in order to be able to use those counselors, we got to get rid of political correctness and let people say what they mean and really put their ideals out on the table and explain why those are good ideals. I would be willing to debate anyone on the president's team on health care and how it should be administered and how it can be done for less money.
I'll tell you what
I don't get a chance to do that.
Because we're running out of time, and I want you to come back and tell the story. You explained it so well on Francis Scott Key. I'm going to invite Austin Goolsbee on with you, and if you would come next week, maybe we can talk about those issues. Your book is amazing. The speech was amazing. I put it on my website, Hannity.com. I hope you'll come back and see us again.
Absolutely. Thank you. And
coming up next, you'll meet the Ohio poll worker who voted for Barack Obama twice, but that's not all. We'll tell you about it next.